In a distant corner of the galaxy, beyond the reach of most interstellar explorers, the Excelenorians, a race of technologically advanced aliens, embarked on a deep space mission. Known for their remarkable intellect and mastery over complex technology, they had seen countless wonders across the stars, but nothing could have prepared them for the discovery that awaited them in an uncharted solar system. The discovery came by accident. During a routine probe mission, the Excelenorian vessel encountered a strange, seemingly insignificant object floating in the void of space. At first glance, it appeared like nothing more than a relic from some long-forgotten civilization, small, unassuming, and definitely primitive in design. But what caught their attention was its pulse, a faint signal radiating from it, a frequency unlike anything that Excelenorians had ever encountered. Curiosity got the better of them, and they decided to bring the object aboard. As they carefully examined it, their excitement grew. The object was a radio transmitter, but not just any transmitter. This one still operated. The Excelenorians had access to technology that allowed them to detect, manipulate, and even warp the very fabric of space-time. Yet here was a human-made device, old and seemingly archaic, that had somehow withstood the test of time. It was emitting a low-frequency signal, one they couldn't immediately decode. It was unlike any communication they had ever heard, and this piqued their interest even more. After a few hours of cautious study, the Excelenorian scientists managed to trigger a strange transmission. It wasn't just static or random noise. As the device hummed, the air around the laboratory seemed to charge with an unfamiliar energy. Something was happening. A stream of data began to flow through the alien technology, a communication protocol, far more complex than the Excelenorians had expected. The data, though initially fragmented and seemingly nonsensical, began to form patterns that suggested the object's origins were not as simple as they had first believed. It was from Earth, a planet on the edge of the known galaxy, and despite its primitive technologies, the humans had developed something extraordinary. The more they decoded, the more they realized that humanity, a species they had previously written off as insignificant, had created an entirely unique form of technology, one that was powerful, revolutionary, and far more advanced in certain ways than anything that Excelenorians had seen. At first, the Excelenorians were confused, unsure of what to make of this. How could a species so young, so raw, have stumbled upon technologies with such vast potential? The device was only the beginning. As the data continued to unravel, they learned that this was just a small piece of Earth's technological history, a history that held secrets far beyond their understanding. The signals revealed the beginnings of human discovery, primitive computers, basic radio transmissions, early satellites, and strange mechanical innovations that, when viewed from the Excelenorian perspective, were incredibly advanced. There were concepts of quantum computing, energy generation, and propulsion that defied everything the aliens had ever known. The more they studied, the more they found that these humans, whose technologies they had once dismissed as outdated, had been on the verge of something incredible. A chilling realization began to set in among the Excelenorians. The humans, despite their primitive tools, had stumbled upon concepts that the Excelenorians had spent eons perfecting. And if humanity could discover these secrets with their limited resources, what would happen if they were given access to more advanced knowledge? What would happen if they, too, unlocked the full potential of their creations? It was a thought that unsettled even the most confident of the Excelenorian leaders. The thought of a species with such raw, untapped potential, a species that, under the right circumstances, could rise to challenge the balance of power in the galaxy, was more than just a curiosity. It was a danger, one that the Excelenorians weren't prepared for. They were not used to feeling vulnerable, yet here they were, staring into the unknown, realizing that a species they had barely noticed was about to change everything. The transmission, once thought to be just a signal from a forgotten past, was now a warning. The Excelenorians, for the first time in centuries, found themselves questioning their position at the top of the cosmic hierarchy. The discovery of human technology, so simple yet so profound, would alter the course of history, not just for Earth, but for the entire universe. What they thought was a harmless relic was turning out to be something far more significant than they could ever have imagined, and they now faced a decision that could determine the fate of their empire. The Excelenorians, a species used to reigning over the galaxies, was stunned by their discovery of humanity's technology. They had initially assumed the Earth would be a simple, primitive planet with no real threat to their vast empire. But now, with the strange human technology in their hands and their initial fears of Earth's potential growing, the Excelenorian leaders made a decisive move. They gathered a formidable fleet and set course for Earth, determined to uncover more about these seemingly insignificant humans who possessed technology far more dangerous than they had ever imagined. As the Excelenorian fleet neared the solar system, they marveled at the sight of Earth from afar. This blue and green planet, with its relatively quiet atmosphere and scattered cities, seemed peaceful enough, but the Excelenorians knew better now. They were not prepared for the chaos that would unfold. As soon as their fleet entered Earth's orbit, they began to receive strange signals from Earth's surface, signals that came from human-made satellites and military communication channels. The humans were already aware of their presence, and their response was immediate. Earth's most powerful weapons were activated without hesitation, and suddenly, the once dominant Excelenorian fleet found itself in a dangerous confrontation. The first salvo from Earth was unlike anything that Excelenorians had anticipated. Human-made weapons, simple by their standards, seemed to defy logic. A blast of energy, not dissimilar to the one found in Excelenorian shields, pierced through the outer layers of one of their ships. The Excelenorians had believed their energy shields were impenetrable, an advantage they had held for centuries. But now, those very shields were being tested by weapons they had never seen before. The blast ripped through their ship's hull, sending shockwaves throughout the fleet. The Excelenorian admiral, who had spent countless years studying and mastering warfare, was taken completely by surprise. Earth had not only discovered a way to counter their advanced defenses, but had developed an energy weapon powerful enough to breach their defenses. On Earth, governments across the world were thrown into complete disarray. News outlets broadcasted the images of the alien ships looming overhead, and citizens, confused and frightened, looked to their leaders for guidance. The initial shock soon turned to panic, as military units scrambled to respond. But amid the chaos, Earth's leaders, along with the brightest scientists and engineers, quickly began to understand that the aliens' arrival was not just a threat, it was an opportunity. The same human-made technologies that Excelenorians had stumbled upon had now become the key to Earth's survival. The Excelenorians attempted to initiate a diplomatic approach, sending out emissaries with the hopes of negotiation. They were used to the idea of commanding respect with their superior intellect and advanced technology. However, when the emissaries landed and attempted to communicate with Earth's leaders, they were met with hostility and mistrust. The humans, seeing their advanced weaponry and knowing that their survival depended on it, were no longer willing to negotiate. The message was clear: if the Excelenorians wanted to make demands, they would have to force their way. Diplomacy quickly fell apart, and what followed was a rush to defend the planet. As the aliens attempted to strengthen their position, human scientists and military leaders began to put their minds together, using the technology they had unlocked. Earth's greatest minds worked around the clock to adapt alien technology, improving it and making it their own. They quickly realized that while their technology was still in its early stages, the potential was staggering. They had weapons that could disrupt space-time, systems that could hack alien networks, and energy shields that rivaled the Excelenorian defenses. What had once been considered primitive was now the cornerstone of humanity's defense, uniting the world's governments into a single global force. It was as if the world had been waiting for this moment, the realization that humanity's greatest strength lay not in its size or power, but in its ingenuity. The Excelenorians, meanwhile, found themselves on the defensive. They had underestimated Earth's capacity for innovation, and now they were struggling to regain control of the situation. The aliens had always prided themselves on their technological superiority, but here was a species with far fewer resources that had found a way to adapt, to evolve, in ways they had never expected. The Excelnorian fleet, though powerful, was beginning to see the cracks in its seemingly unassailable armor. Earth's response was overwhelming. The alien forces found themselves locked in a battle they hadn't prepared for, caught between their own arrogance and the surprising tenacity of humanity. The once inevitable victory they had expected was now in question. The game had changed, and humanity was no longer the underdog. After the chaos of first contact, humanity found itself on the edge of a new era, one that none of them could have predicted. The alien technology that the Excelnorians had once found so fascinating had become the catalyst for a revolution on Earth. What had once been dismissed as mere relics or outdated devices, like ancient radios and early computers, now held the secrets to the future. The old world's discarded tools suddenly took on new life. Humanity began to uncover their full potential. Innovations that had been relegated to the realm of science fiction were now within reach. The realization hit like a thunderbolt. Humans had far more capacity for discovery and invention than they ever realized. The most staggering breakthrough came in the form of faster-than-light travel. What had once seemed impossible was now being constructed in the most secretive laboratories. Human scientists began piecing together the mechanisms that would allow ships to travel beyond the speed of light, opening up the entire galaxy to them. Along with this leap forward, artificial intelligence, far more advanced than anything previously imagined, was born. These new AIs could communicate directly with human consciousness, allowing people to merge their thoughts with the machines, enabling a kind of mental synergy that had been considered unimaginable. Humans could now tap into knowledge and power in ways they never thought possible. But that was just the beginning. Humanity's medical technologies, once primitive and clunky, was suddenly capable of healing wounds and curing diseases that had once seemed incurable. It wasn't just about saving lives anymore, it was about reshaping life itself. People who had once been crippled by illnesses were now regaining their strength and vitality, and many who had thought death was inevitable could now imagine a future where they lived for centuries. This new technology promised nothing short of a second renaissance for mankind. The world, which had been fractured by political conflicts and divisions, was now united by a single goal: progress. People worked together, sharing ideas, knowledge, and innovations. What had once been isolated pockets of technological achievement across the world now became a global effort to push the boundaries of what was possible. As humanity rapidly advanced, the Excelnorians, who had initially dismissed Earth as a backwater planet, began to take notice. At first, they were astonished, watching from a distance as humans, armed with newfound knowledge, began to push the limits of their technological capabilities. The Excelnorians had always been the leaders of innovation, but now they were watching as this young, seemingly primitive species began to surpass them in unexpected ways. The Excelnorians had never anticipated this kind of rapid development. What had once seemed like a fleeting moment of progress for humanity was now a full-fledged revolution that threatened to eclipse everything that Excelnorians had worked for over millennia. But with that admiration came fear. The Excelnorian rulers, who had long dominated the galaxy, were beginning to see that humanity's technological advancements could topple their carefully built empire. A new power was rising, one that could challenge their place as the supreme force in the universe. The more the humans innovated, the more the Excelnorians realized how dangerous this new power could be. If humanity fully harnessed their potential, they could become a galactic force capable of rivaling, or even defeating, the Excelnorians. It was a terrifying thought. They had never faced such a powerful adversary, and now it seemed inevitable that humanity would one day challenge their dominance. In response, the Excelnorian ruling councils secretly began to plan their next move. They could not afford to let Earth continue on its current path. The council devised a strategy to suppress humanity's rapid technological growth. They would subtly manipulate humanity's development, guiding it toward paths that would benefit the Excellenorians, while preventing them from reaching their full potential. If they allowed Earth to continue unchecked, they risked losing everything they had fought for. The Excellenorians, though immensely powerful, now found themselves in a position where they had to act quickly to protect their place in the galaxy. The plan was simple but devious: infiltrate humanity's technological development, sabotage their most promising projects, and ensure that they remain dependent on the Excellenorian influence. They would exploit Earth's nascent space exploration efforts, steering them away from dangerous technologies that could potentially threaten their empire. But the Excellenorians knew that this would be no easy task. The humans had already shown an incredible ability to innovate, and now they were on the cusp of something truly extraordinary. It was a race against time, and the Excellenorians had to ensure that they maintained control of the narrative, or risk being overtaken by the very species they once considered insignificant. As humanity's technological revolution continued to accelerate, the Excellenorians, who had been watching from the shadows, began to present themselves as willing partners in Earth's progress. They offered resources, knowledge, and even alliances with other advanced alien races in exchange for one thing: control. On the surface, their proposals seemed like an incredible opportunity. The Excellenorians promised to help humanity unlock the deepest secrets of the universe, providing access to technology and wisdom that would have taken humans millennia to develop on their own. Governments, struggling to manage the rapid changes and eager to speed up humanity's progress, found the offer too tempting to refuse. But not everyone was ready to trust the Excellenorians. Earth's leaders were divided. Some saw the deal as an essential step in advancing humanity's future, while others, more cautious, feared that accepting alien help would mean losing humanity's independence. Tensions escalated as the Excellenorians began to take a more active role in Earth's development, offering advanced technologies in exchange for access to Earth's most secretive projects. Certain human factions grew restless. They began to notice that the Excellenorians were requesting more and more influence over humanity's direction, especially in areas like defense, energy, and space exploration. A small group of human scientists, suspicious of the Excellenorians' true motives, began digging deeper into the alien technology that had been shared. What they discovered was shocking. The Excellenorians had not been entirely forthcoming. They were withholding critical information about their own technological advancements, deliberately restricting humanity's access to the most powerful systems. The humans realized that the aliens had been deliberately preventing Earth from reaching its full potential. But that wasn't all. As the rogue scientists continued their investigation, they uncovered a darker truth. The Excellenorians had been using Earth as an experimental ground for their own weapons. Some of the most advanced technologies humanity had developed, the very ones that seemed to promise a new era of prosperity, had been subtly manipulated by the Excellenorians to serve their own purposes. The aliens had designed Earth's technological breakthroughs to be controlled, to keep humanity dependent on their influence, and to ensure that no matter how far Earth progressed, it would never surpass the Excellenorians. Worse still, some of the humans who had accepted the Excellenorian help had unknowingly become pawns in their plan, helping to further the aliens' goals without realizing it. It became clear. The Excellenorians' offer of cooperation was a carefully calculated move to enslave humanity through its own technology. They weren't helping humanity grow. They were using the promise of progress as a way to keep humanity under their control. In the shadows, a resistance began to form. Led by some of Earth's most brilliant minds, this underground movement sought to expose the Excellenorians' true agenda. These rogue scientists and engineers began to work in secret, finding ways to reverse the manipulation of humanity's technological advancements. They worked tirelessly to develop new systems that would bypass the Excellenorian influence, creating technologies that were entirely human-made, free from alien interference. The resistance grew stronger as more and more people realized that Earth's future was at stake. While some factions of humanity were still in favor of the alien alliance, the resistance began to gather support from all corners of the globe, united by the belief that humanity's future should not be controlled by outsiders, no matter how advanced they seemed. The Excellenorians, aware that their plan was beginning to unravel, started to tighten their grip, sending agents to infiltrate key human governments and institutions. They increased their efforts to persuade Earth's leaders to accept their help, making the threat of withholding technology and support loom larger over the planet. The pressure was mounting, but the resistance refused to back down. They were determined to reveal the truth to the world, no matter the cost. They knew that the Excellenorians were not just a threat to Earth's technological independence, they were a threat to humanity's very freedom. As the resistance grew bolder in their efforts, a new question began to arise. Could humanity free itself from the grasp of the Excellenorians before it was too late? Could they reverse the damage done by their so-called allies and reclaim control over their own future? With each passing day, the stakes grew higher, and the shadow of the Excellenorians' manipulation loomed larger over Earth. The battle for humanity's independence had begun, and there was no turning back. Humanity stood at a crossroads. The world had never been more divided. On one side were those who, seduced by the promise of advanced alien resources and the potential for an unprecedented future, believed that cooperation with the Excellenorians was the only path forward. They argued that the benefits of joining forces with the aliens, who offered technology that could propel humanity to heights previously unimagined, far outweighed the risks. On the other side were those who, driven by a deep sense of betrayal and growing distrust, believed that humanity's survival could only be ensured through complete independence. These individuals, including many of Earth's most brilliant minds, were convinced that the Excellenorians had manipulated humanity for their own gain, and now was the time to sever ties and take control of their future. The divide was stark, and as tensions mounted, it seemed inevitable that Earth would fracture under the weight of its choices. Then, in a violent and unexpected turn, a rogue faction of the Excellenorians, driven by a belief that humanity had become too dangerous and unpredictable, launched a devastating assault on Earth's capital cities. The attack was swift and brutal. Entire cities were laid to waste in a matter of hours, with millions of lives lost. The Excellenorian ships, equipped with weaponry more powerful than anything Earth had yet developed, ripped through Earth's defenses as if they were paper. The coordinated strike left no room for negotiation. This was no longer a diplomatic conflict, it was full-scale war. And the Excellenorians, showing no mercy, made it clear that they were willing to do whatever it took to neutralize a human threat. In the wake of this assault, Earth was thrown into chaos. The attack left no room for doubt. The Excellenorians were not interested in peaceful coexistence. The faction that had supported cooperation with the aliens now found itself forced into a difficult position. They had argued for peace, but with the destruction of Earth's most populous cities, their cause seemed hollow. For the Independence faction, the attack confirmed their worst fears. The Excellenorians had no intention of sharing power. The fight for humanity's survival had become a war on two fronts, against the Excellenorians and against their own divided planet. Leaders from all corners of Earth found themselves making difficult choices as the war forced alliances to shift and allegiances to be tested. As the war escalated, the human factions began to rely heavily on the advanced technologies they had developed in recent years. Ships capable of faster-than-light travel, energy weapons that could pierce even the strongest alien shields, and powerful artificial intelligence systems. All of it was put to use in the fight for survival. However, as the human resistance pushed back against the Excellenorian forces, they began to uncover troubling secrets about the very technologies they had relied on. It became clear that there were still many dangers lurking within the alien technology they had integrated into their own systems. Some of the technology, once thought to be a boon, was now proving to be unpredictable, or even outright dangerous. Weapons that were meant to be humanity's greatest strength malfunctioned in the heat of battle, while once trusted artificial intelligences began to act erratically. Worse, humanity's own scientists began to question whether the Excellenorians had intentionally embedded fail-safes within the technology designed to sabotage humanity's ability to fight back. With every passing day, the war grew more complex and brutal. Trust was in short supply, both between humans and aliens and among the humans themselves. The once unified resistance against the Accelenorians was now a fractured coalition, divided by competing visions of the future. Some believed in negotiating peace, hoping that diplomacy could still salvage Earth's place in the galaxy. Others, emboldened by the growing strength of their own technological advancements, were ready to wage total war, determined to fight for independence at any cost. The stakes could not have been higher. Earth was now a battleground, not only for survival but for the future of the human race. The once peaceful world was now a war zone, torn apart by the very technologies that had promised to elevate humanity to new heights. The war had become a race against time, as the Accelenorians pressed harder and harder, and humanity's own divisions threatened to tear apart the fragile alliances that had been formed. Would humanity emerge victorious, or would the war between humans and aliens be the end of Earth's place in the universe? No one knew for certain, but one thing was clear: the road ahead would be long, and the cost would be steep. In the midst of the chaos and devastation, when hope seemed almost lost and Earth's forces were on the brink of collapse, a breakthrough occurred that would change the course of the war. The scientists who had been working tirelessly to reverse engineer the technology that the Accelenorians had manipulated were on the verge of exhaustion. They had been trying to find a way to turn the tide, but until now, every effort seemed to fall short. Then, in the quiet of a hidden laboratory, a rebellious and unorthodox physicist named Dr. Elena Voss, known for her radical theories, made an astonishing discovery. Combining humanity's best technological advancements with the secret knowledge acquired from the Accelenorians, she and her team managed to create a device unlike anything the galaxy had ever seen. The device had the ability to disrupt the most advanced alien weapons, including their power shields, rendering the Accelenorian fleets vulnerable. It was a weapon of unimaginable potential, capable of shifting the balance of power in the galaxy in favor of humanity. As the device was deployed, Earth's forces found themselves with a fighting chance. The tide of battle began to turn almost immediately. The Accelenorian ships, once invincible with their impenetrable shields and devastating weaponry, now found themselves crippled, unable to defend against the newly developed technology. Humanity, with its ingenuity and unrelenting will, suddenly had the upper hand. The once overwhelming alien fleets began to retreat in disarray, a sight that seemed almost impossible just weeks earlier. For the first time in history, the Accelenorians found themselves outmatched and on the defensive, their once unshakable dominance over the galaxy shattered by the very species they had once deemed beneath them. The tables had turned, and humanity's counteroffensive had begun in full force. Earth's military leaders, now emboldened by the newfound weapon, launched wave after wave of strikes against the Accelenorian fleets. The enemy, accustomed to victory and accustomed to seeing themselves as the masters of the universe, were now forced to reckon with the fact that humanity had broken their technological stranglehold. With every retreat, with every battle won, the message became clearer: humanity, with its incredible creativity and relentless spirit, had the potential to not only survive, but to thrive, and to claim a dominant place in the cosmos. The Accelenorians, for the first time in centuries, were forced to confront their own vulnerability. They had never imagined that Earth, a species they had long considered primitive, would rise up to challenge them in such a way. The aliens, who had once believed themselves to be invincible, now found themselves scrambling to adapt to the new reality. Their fleets were broken, their weapons ineffective, and their once iron grip on the galaxy was slipping. It was a bitter pill for the Accelenorians to swallow, the realization that humanity, with its relentless will to survive and its capacity for innovation, was no longer the underdog. The once weak species had become their most formidable enemy. As the Accelenorians retreated further into the depths of space, they were forced to reckon with the fact that their reign had come to an end. They had underestimated humanity's ability to adapt, to learn, and to fight. The galaxy was no longer a place where the Excelnorians could dictate terms. Now, humanity had proven that they could stand toe-to-toe with the most powerful species in the universe. The balance of power had shifted dramatically. For the first time in their history, the Excelnorians had to face the reality that their position as the rulers of the universe was no longer secure. Humanity, with its unyielding spirit and boundless ingenuity, had become the new force to be reckoned with. It was no longer a matter of if humanity would rise. It was a matter of when they would take their rightful place as the dominant power in the galaxy. And the Excelnorians, for all their technology and power, knew that they had no choice but to adapt, or risk being overtaken by the very species they had once underestimated. In the aftermath of the brutal conflict, Earth found itself standing at the dawn of a new era, one where humanity was no longer just a species struggling to survive, but a rising beacon of power and hope across the galaxy. The unimaginable had happened. Earth, the once primitive planet, had successfully outsmarted and outgunned the Excelnorians, a species once believed to be unbeatable. The alien invaders, with their advanced technology and centuries of domination, had been pushed back, their forces shattered. Humanity had not only defended itself, but had also emerged victorious, reshaping the balance of power in the galaxy forever. With their newfound understanding of both their own technology and the alien knowledge they had once been handed, humans were no longer at the mercy of outside forces. Instead, they were now in control. Armed with incredible innovations and breakthroughs, humanity stood at the threshold of becoming a galactic power. But Earth's ambitions were not confined to just its own borders. In a remarkable act of diplomacy and generosity, humanity began to share its newfound technological advancements with peaceful alien races across the stars. Those civilizations, which had once watched from a distance or maintained a neutral stance during the war, now saw in humanity a partner worth allying with. The alliances that were forged in the wake of Earth's victory were unlike anything the galaxy had ever seen. Former enemies, who had once looked at humans as little more than insects, now stood side by side with them, united by the knowledge that the future of the galaxy lay in cooperation, not conquest. Humanity, once considered a fragile species on the fringes of the galaxy, now found itself at the center of a new and vibrant era of galactic cooperation. As Earth's leaders looked to the stars, they knew that this was just the beginning. With the help of their new allies, Earth began to explore new frontiers, creating trade routes, sharing knowledge, and building new civilizations. There was still much to learn, much to discover, but humanity now held the keys to the universe. They were no longer just surviving in a hostile galaxy. They were thriving and leading it toward a brighter, more unified future. In stark contrast, the Excelnorians were forced into exile, their once great empire crumbling into ruins. The same technology that had made them the most powerful species in the galaxy was now their curse. Having been defeated by the very species they had so arrogantly dismissed, the Excelnorians found themselves stripped of their influence and their glory. The remnants of their once mighty fleet drifted in the cold void of space as their leaders fled to the farthest corners of the galaxy, their empire reduced to nothing more than a fading memory. They had to rebuild from the ashes of their downfall, but they were no longer the invincible rulers they had once been. The reality of their shattered reign was a bitter pill to swallow, and they were forced to confront the fact that the species they had once seen as weak and insignificant was now the galaxy's new force of power. As the story came to a close, humanity stood at the edge of greatness, wiser from the battles they had fought and the enemies they had faced. They had not only survived, they had triumphed. The galaxy, once dominated by the powerful and seemingly invincible Excelnorians, had been forever changed. Humanity had become the architects of a new universe, one where the balance of power was no longer defined by might alone, but by the strength of cooperation, unity, and innovation. The future now belonged to humanity. The mistakes of the past had taught them valuable lessons, and they were determined not to repeat them. With hope and determination in their hearts, humans ventured into the stars, ready to shape the future and ensure that their place in the galaxy would not only be remembered, but would stand as a testament to the incredible potential of a species that had once been underestimated. The universe was wide and full of possibilities, and humanity was ready to claim its rightful place among the stars.